Hi, I'm Amelia, a 31-year-old new mother, navigating the beautiful yet overwhelming world of parenthood. Those first days at home with my newborn son were a blur of pure joy and utter exhaustion. While he filled our lives with happiness, the physical toll of childbirth was more challenging than I had expected. The house was in chaos, laundry was stacked up, and the dishes never seemed to leave the sink. One afternoon, as I was desperately trying to calm my crying baby, the doorbell rang. It was Linda, my mother-in-law, dropping by unannounced. Her eyes quickly scanned the cluttered living room, and I could sense a mix of concern and disapproval settle on her face. "I thought I'd stop by to see how you're managing, dear," Linda said, stepping over a stray baby toy. "Tom mentioned you might need some help." "Thanks, Linda. Things are a bit hectic, but we're managing," I said, doing my best to hide the strain in my voice. Linda moved into the kitchen, where the clatter of dirty dishes seemed to echo my stress. "It looks like you need more than just a little help," she said, her tone sharp. "This place is a mess. Is this how you plan to raise my grandson?" Her words cut deep, and the weight of her judgment pressed heavily on my already fragile spirit. "I'm doing the best I can," I replied defensively, clutching my son a bit tighter. Linda let out a long sigh. "Amelia, being a mother is about getting your priorities straight. Right now, it seems like you haven't prioritized anything at all." I felt anger rising, ready to respond. When Tom walked in and sensed the tension, he immediately tried to defuse the situation. "Mom, Amelia is doing an amazing job. It's been really tough with the baby not sleeping well," he said, stepping in to defend me. But instead of backing down, Linda turned to him with a cold gaze. "You need to help her understand what's at stake, Tom. It's not just about cleaning up the house. It's about responsibility. She's not living up to the family standards." Tom looked between me and his mother, clearly torn. "Mom, please, let's not do this now. Amelia is recovering, and..." "That's exactly why she needs discipline now," Linda interrupted, her voice rising. "If she learns it now, she'll manage better in the future. You can't be soft on her, Tom." For a moment, he hesitated. Then, in a voice that sounded foreign even to him, Tom said, "Maybe you're right, Mom. Maybe Amelia needs to learn the hard way." "Exactly," Linda nodded, pushing him gently but firmly toward me. "Show her that this behavior won't be tolerated." I barely had time to register what was happening before Tom's hand struck my cheek. The sharp crack echoed through the room, a horrifying sound that marked the line that had just been crossed. I held our son close, his cries blending with the pounding of my heart. "Tom, what are you doing?" I choked out through the tears, the sting of the slap far less painful than the betrayal that accompanied it. "This is for your own good, Amelia. You need to learn," Tom said, his voice hollow, eyes refusing to meet mine. The room fell silent, save for the soft whimpers of our son. Tom glanced at me, his face betraying a mixture of frustration and regret, but the damage had already been done. Linda stood firm, her expression unreadable, yet her presence unwavering in its silent approval. What should have been a supportive visit had morphed into a brutal attack on my worth as a mother and as a person. As Linda prepared to leave, she whispered something to Tom at the door. I couldn't catch it, but his troubled expression told me it wasn't words of comfort. That night, as I rocked my son to sleep, the dread that had settled over me felt suffocating. What was supposed to be a supportive family structure felt more like a tribunal, with me as the defendant on trial. As I soothed both my son and my stinging cheek, clarity began to form. This couldn't go on. Something had to change. The chaos was overwhelming, and I knew I needed a plan, a way out, not just for my safety, but for the well-being of my little boy. The house that once felt like a home now felt like a trap, set by the very people who were supposed to love and protect us. The night after Tom slapped me, manipulated by his mother Linda, I couldn't bring myself to sleep next to him. With my baby in my arms, I retreated to the nursery, the only place that had been a refuge for us in recent weeks. As I rocked my son to sleep, the events of the day played on a loop in my mind, each pass sharpening the pain and betrayal. I knew I couldn't stay. The next morning, while Tom was at work and Linda was likely in her own world, I made the call. Jessica answered on the second ring. "Jess, it's me." "I need that help you offered," I said, my voice wavering between fear and determination. "Say no more, Amelia. I'll be there today with my truck. We can store your things at my place until you figure out what's next." Jessica replied, her voice steady and reassuring. The plan was simple, but it came with risks. I would pack what I could during the day, just the essentials for my son and me. Jessica would help me move everything in the evening, before Tom came home from work. I knew I couldn't face him. If I did, he might sway me with apologies or, worse, Linda might influence him again. As I packed, every tiny outfit and baby toy felt weighted with memories and what-ifs. But the echo of Tom's slap and the cold, calculating look in Linda's eyes were all the reminders I needed that staying was no longer an option. By late afternoon, most of our things were boxed up and stashed in the garage. Just as the sun began to dip, Jessica arrived, her presence a beacon of hope in one of the darkest moments of my life. "Ready?" she asked, taking in the scene, my life reduced to boxes and bags. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, my heart heavy but resolute. Holding my son a little tighter. We worked quickly, loading the truck with the efficiency and speed of a well-practiced team. The nursery, my sanctuary, was the last room I cleared. I took a moment there, a silent goodbye to the life I had once dreamed of building with Tom. As we drove away, I watched the house shrink in the rearview mirror, a chapter closing with a heavy yet hopeful heart. My baby slept peacefully in his seat, unaware of the change, but finally safe. This was the first night of our new life, one where fear and manipulation no longer had any place. Safe at Jessica's, the contrast between the peace I found there and the oppressive atmosphere of my own home only strengthened my resolve. It wasn't just about escaping. It was about making sure that Tom and Linda couldn't twist the narrative, couldn't hurt anyone else the way they had hurt me. I began planning, not just for my safety, but to expose the truth. I reached out to family and friends under the guise of catching up, subtly recording our conversations whenever Linda or Tom's behavior came up. Some were hesitant to speak openly, but many hadn't realized the extent of Linda's manipulation or Tom's submission to her. Over the next few weeks, I collected text messages, voicemails, and recorded calls, each piece building a clearer picture of their control. The most damning piece of evidence came when I managed to capture a video of Linda coaching Tom on how to handle me, using words that revealed her true intentions. This was about control, not concern. With everything in place, I chose the perfect moment for confrontation, a family gathering hosted by Tom's sister for her anniversary. It was a neutral space with enough family members present, some of whom had already quietly expressed discomfort with Linda's dominance in the family dynamics. On the day of the gathering, my nerves were stretched taut. I arrived with Jessica by my side, her presence a source of strength as I prepared to face them. The murmurs of greeting were distant and uneasy. Everyone could sense the tension. Tom and Linda's recent domestic issues had rippled through the family, leaving a quiet unease even among the most distant relatives. After the initial pleasantries, I knew the time was coming. I stood up, my hands trembling, but my voice steady. "I have something important to share with all of you today," I began, feeling every eye in the room lock onto me. "It's about Tom and his mother, Linda, and how their actions have not only affected me and my son, but the entire family." Tom, looking shocked and a bit panicked, tried to cut me off. "Amelia, let's not do this here," he said, his voice strained. But I pressed forward, pulling out my phone. "This is not just a personal matter," I said as I connected my phone to the Bluetooth speaker. The room grew silent, thick with tension, as the recordings played. Linda's sharp commands, Tom's hesitant compliance, and their plotting to correct my behavior echoed through the room. The reactions around me shifted from surprise to disgust. Tom's aunt, who had always been kind to me, looked especially betrayed. "Is this true, Linda? Were you forcing Tom to do these things?" she demanded. Linda's face contorted with fury and panic as she tried to deflect. "These are taken out of context," she snapped, but her words sounded hollow. Then Tom's cousin, who had been quiet until now, stood up. "No, they're not. We've seen hints of this for years. We just didn't want to believe it." That simple statement shifted everything. The tide turned, and relatives began to share their own observations, their own experiences. Piece by piece, they revealed the portrait of a woman who had manipulated her family for years, hiding behind the guise of a concerned matriarch. Tom sat there, pale and silent, finally realizing the extent of the web his mother had woven around him. As the family meeting dissolved into a heated discussion about Linda's influence, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The truth was out, not just for me, but for everyone to see. When a storm of confrontation finally calmed, the room was left with a somber realization. Tom's family, long under Linda's sway, now saw her manipulations for what they truly were. The collective shock was palpable, and the discomfort in the room was undeniable as everyone began to process just how deeply Linda's control had burrowed into their lives. For me, the decision to leave Tom, though painful, was necessary. As the family gathering slowly dispersed, I felt the finality of my choice settle in. I gathered my son, who remained blissfully unaware of the turmoil that had just unfolded. With one last look at the family home, I turned and walked away, knowing that this chapter had finally come to an end. I stepped into the unknown, feeling both a sense of loss and a growing resolve. Tom watched us leave, a mixture of sorrow and resignation in his eyes. His voice, once so familiar, now seemed like a distant echo as he whispered a weak goodbye. Linda, on the other hand, faced a much harsher reality. The family she had so tightly controlled had turned their backs on her, each member grappling with feelings of betrayal and misplaced trust. The blame for the family's unraveling rested squarely on her shoulders. Her attempts to regain control fell on deaf ears. Too much had been revealed, and the collective testimony at the gathering was impossible to ignore. In the weeks that followed, Tom reached out, his messages a mix of apologies, pleas for understanding, and promises of change. But the memory of his hand raised against me, the echo of Linda's influence guiding his actions, were barriers too high to overcome. The trust between us was shattered, and with it, the foundation of our marriage. I found refuge in a small apartment, far from the neighborhood I once called home. It was a place where no one knew my story, a place where I could start over. Jessica remained my rock, helping me navigate this new phase of life. My days became filled with the simple routines of caring for my son and rebuilding a world free from the shadows of the past. The healing process was slow and often painful. There were days when the weight of everything that had happened threatened to overwhelm me, but the freedom to make choices without fear of manipulation or abuse was a powerful motivator. I started therapy, joined support groups for single mothers, and gradually, the pieces of my old self began to come back together, forming someone stronger, more resilient. My son's laughter became my anchor, and his milestones, first steps, first words, were beacons of hope, guiding me forward. As he grew, so did my confidence in our future. I was building a life on my terms, and slowly, the pain of the past began to lose its grip. Months turned into a year, and one evening, as I put my son to bed in our cozy living room, filled with his drawings and toys, I reflected on the journey. The pain of the past was still there, but it was now a faint shadow, dwarfed by the light of new beginnings. The support of friends and the unconditional love of my son had woven a safety net strong enough to catch me on the days I faltered. Sitting down with a cup of tea, I felt ready to share my story. I started a blog, a space where I could speak openly about my experiences, connect with others who might be fighting their own battles against manipulation and abuse. Each post was a step away from the victim I had been and a step closer to the advocate I was becoming. As my story of resilience and courage comes to a close, I want to leave you with a question. Do you believe it's possible to fully break free from manipulative family dynamics, or do the shadows of such relationships linger in our lives forever? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments. I would love to hear your perspective.